As you probably know, Donald Trump was removed from Facebook on January 6th in the wake of the riot protest demonstration thing that occurred. And then on January 7th, that suspension was extended indefinitely, something that Facebook doesn't typically do. They typically allow people the opportunity to come back, at least according to what we're going to read. What you may not know is that that decision was actually subject to review by a new oversight committee that Facebook has implemented. And this committee is apparently quasi-independent, at least. Who knows what that even means? However, they have now decided that the suspension was correct, the extension of the suspension was correct, but maybe indefinite is a bit too long, which, in a shocking turn of events, gives me some hope for social media and the protection of speech in some way. Let's talk about it. I'm Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. I'm a lawyer, but I'm also a legal and political commentator on YouTube and also on Odyssey. You can find me here at Rekieta Law on YouTube, and you can find me here at Rekieta Law on Odyssey as well. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, so you don't miss any videos, okay? All right, so we've got Donald Trump. We've got his, how do we say this? His speech on January 6th, which is not the same as the Capitol Hill demonstration, protest, riot, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. Don't get mixed up on the language about what the January 6th stuff was. That doesn't matter. What we need to remember is that Trump's speech was distinct and separate from the events that followed a mile and a half away and actually started in the middle of his speech. That being said, he was removed from Facebook for propagating the idea that there was something improper about the election. Now, he was also removed from Twitter, and that's a separate thing. This is about his Facebook suspension. That suspension has now been reviewed by Facebook's new oversight board, which somehow, I guess removals on Facebook are now subject to this oversight board. I don't know if it's all removals. Let's see what the article has to say about it. So Facebook was justified in banning then-President Donald Trump from its platform the day after the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol, but it needs to reassess how long the ban will remain in effect, the social network's quasi-independent oversight board said Wednesday. Okay, first of all, no, they were not justified in banning Donald Trump. The bannings on social media need to stop, especially bannings involving politicians or political speech. It just needs to stop. This is not a free society if you can't freely express ideas about, you know, the most important thing that happens every 4 years, which is the election itself. That is the one place where everybody, including elected officials, should be allowed to express their open opinion without question. Now, I think that every topic should be subject to people's open opinions without question, but this is one we should be able to agree on, that people should be allowed to express their opinions about a thing. That, especially when that thing is the election that happens every 4 years, the presidential election in particular. This is how we decide who runs our country. And it's also how we discuss the policies and politics around selecting that person next time. It's important that even if we have some unpopular or popular opinions about what happened this time, that we get to discuss things in the context of at least next time. And right now on social media, those topics are very, very risky. They're very, very risky on YouTube. They're risky on Twitter. They're risky on Facebook, because any suggestion that something might need to change is regarded as going against the pre-approved media-selected truth. And if we're not allowed to talk about it, how do we change, modify, enhance, or even approve existing policy around it? We can't. We can't do it. And that's the big problem there. But let's go on. The decision to uphold the ban is a blow to Trump's hopes to post again to Facebook or Instagram anytime soon, but it opens the door to him eventually returning to the platforms. Facebook must complete a review of the length of the suspension within 6 months, the board said. Within 6 months, it took 5 months to review the ban. Within 6 months is November. This is insane. But okay, the board, look, Facebook, you've got to decide by the time it's been almost a year whether or not he can come back to the platform. That's, again, we're getting into crazy levels on this social media stuff. Removal from social media for a year is cataclysmic. It's cataclysmic for anybody. And I say that in the context of this. Social media companies like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and all of them are designed in a specific way. And that specific way is to provide, I'm going to say it this way, a dopamine response in the user. They want the user to enjoy the user experience to the point where the user will come back to the platform. The worst thing for Facebook and Twitter is a willing user to walk away from the platform, because that means that less eyes are on their advertising dollars. That's their bottom line. So what they want is a user experience that rewards interactivity and activity, and in a way punishes and makes the person feel bad if they miss it. This is fine. This really is fine. That's an okay thing. What makes it particularly nefarious is the idea of banning someone with the knowledge that these platforms are created to incentivize their use, to create a positive response in the user themselves that they want to return, that they have a compulsive need to return in probably an uncomfortable amount of people in the United States. People are, for better or worse phrasing, addicted to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever their social media platform of choice may be. Many people get up and the first thing that they do when they pick up their phone after waking up is check on some social media platform, whatever it is. And this has been going on for a long time. I mean, this goes back to blogs. This goes back to Usenet type forums. People would wake up, they'd go down to their computer before phones were able to do this stuff. They would sit down and it's how they'd start their day. Rather than picking up a newspaper of old, for example, they'd sit down and they'd read a forum post and they'd go ahead and see what people are saying about the topic that they cared about. The internet provided this way for you to seek out and find a reliable place to discuss topics that you were interested in, rather than relying on the smorgasbord of a newspaper or magazine that may or may not have an article that's interesting to you. You knew when you went to a particular place, once you found it, that every day you could go and find new information about a subject that you were interested in without question. And that was the genesis of this sort of dopamine response. And it's only gotten better and more advanced with things like Twitter and Facebook, as they have so many resources to pour into figuring out how to get people there, how to get them back, how to notify them when they've been gone too long, to remind them to check on things, how to Facebook will, like, even if you don't use Facebook at all. I have a Facebook, haven't used it really extensively in any sort of, well, actually in any sort of practical capacity in over a year. However, Facebook will drop these notifications that aren't even notifications. It's a suggestion. It's something you could do. Oh, by the way, you could do this or this or this. And the sole purpose is to get me back to that platform in some way. That's what they want to do, because that's where their ad revenue comes from. That's where their data collection comes from. And my mere act of following up with that suggestion is more data for Facebook to assimilate into my profile to then sell to some other advertiser. Oh, this person responds well to this type of suggestion. That's worth something to Facebook. It's worth a lot more than whatever we think it might be worth, because they know how to use it, and they know how to use it by incorporating millions and millions of other responses to the same stimulus. They've created a system that demands that you come back and rewards you for coming back. And your system, your internal computer up here, rewards you for doing the things. It makes you enjoy the experience. And so then to remove someone from those platforms is to cut off an addiction. And that, to me, that they know this, that they've designed around this, and then that they will use removal as punishment, that is more nefarious than just about any other motive that they have. It's something I haven't heard Congress talk about in any real way, in any meaningful way. I mean, they've talked about the dangers of social media addiction, but Congress is so stupid they can't figure out what the real problem is. It's that cutting people off from that social media addiction forcefully and without their consent isn't healing them. It's actually causing them damage, psychological trauma. And that, again, is the problem here. So getting back to this, we're now looking at Trump being removed from Facebook for 11 months as a temporary suspension. But those 11 months could be the most critical time for Donald Trump to have access to people. And that's part of the scary power of this and why this board is so insane. But I do have a little bit of hope, and we'll get to that in a minute. Given the seriousness of the violations and ongoing risk of violence, Facebook was justified in suspending Mr. Trump's accounts on January 6th and extending that suspension on January 7th. The board said that Trump created an environment where a serious risk of violence was possible by maintaining a narrative that the 2020 presidential election, blah, 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 blah. The oversight board said, however, it was not appropriate for Facebook to vary from its normal penalties when it made the ban indefinite. Facebook's normal penalties include removing posts, imposing a limited suspension, or permanently disabling an account, the board said. As Facebook suspended Mr. Trump's accounts indefinitely, the company must reassess the penalty. The board said it is not permissible for Facebook to keep a user off the platform for an undefined period with no criteria for whether the account will be restored. And that's where I'm going to stop reading the article. It'll be linked down in the description if you want to read the rest of it yourself. It doesn't matter. My purpose on this is simple. Indefinite removals, and I would say removals at all, are so far outside of reasonable punishment, given the context of how social media operates, and most importantly, how social media companies have designed those platforms to operate. Removal of content is something that I'm not really in support of. However, that is a reasonable compromise for this. Hey, this content was violative of our policies. We're going to remove it. Please don't do that again. Okay. I mean, I guess, again, I think that's censorship. I'm not a big fan of it. However, it is way, way more just than to remove someone from the way that people have been communicating in the 21st century. I mean, this is how we interact with the world, our friends, our neighbors, our internet friends, all of that stuff. And to lose access to all of your posts, to lose access to your entire history of direct messages, to lose access to the contacts and networks that you've built up on a platform entirely, again, factoring in the idea that these are developed with a specific dopamine response in mind, in your mind, that is the true tragedy here. So the reason this oversight board gives me hope is they're acknowledging that the indefinite ban is not a justified response. Now, the timetable on this is way too long, and Trump's danger for violence or whatever is being way overinflated. Absolutely. However, I have a little bit of hope seeing that somebody somewhere is recognizing that these permanent bans are, at the end of the day, not a just thing. Twitter, take note. You should allow people back on the platform. You shouldn't really be banning anybody from the platform at all. But this is where we are right now, and hopefully, as things progress, we will move away from this idea of banning. Or, you know, maybe the government will step in and label these places as common carriers or something akin to a common carrier, so they're not allowed to just arbitrarily remove people from their platforms for wrongthink, and they have to maybe just police the content. I mean, Facebook and Twitter, literally, Twitter is pre-screening your tweets now for offensive material. These guys can monitor literally everything said on their platform prior to it going public and have no real measurable impact on the user experience. And why do they need to ban people? They can preemptively screen the content itself without the necessity of removing people from the platform entirely. We need to move towards the more just response of having content be violative of policies, not people. Anyway, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thanks for watching today. Catch you next time. Peace. Peace.